I've played a lot of Sega Genesis games, not as many as I would like to, but that being said, I understand what to expect from the Sega Genesis, and as such, today I'm going to cover, in my opinion, the top 10 easiest games on the system. Now, little ground rules. I won't be mentioning edutainment, nor will I cover novelty games that can be beaten quickly. Instead, I'll be solely focusing on games with substance that are easy, games that can be casually played, and, maybe even beaten within what some folks might consider a reasonable amount of time. This doesn't mean that the games won't be absent of any challenge, because every game has some level of challenge. These are just ones that are approachable and fun. Let's begin. The 16-bit era of gaming was dominated by quite a few specific genres, right? RPGs, platformers, beat-em-ups, and more importantly, tons of shooters. Thunder Force 3 is the first game on our list today because in comparison to many of the other shooters available not only on the Genesis but others, this one is incredibly approachable, fun, and it has a badass soundtrack as well. Many of the games in this franchise are phenomenal, but 3 and 4 in particular are the best. I did opt to put 3 on this list instead of 4, but I would encourage you to check out both of them. To me, there are certain elements that make Thunder Force stand out against the other competitors, like Gradius, and that's because when you die, the only weapon that you lose is the weapon that you were currently using, at least on the normal difficulty, which doesn't leave you at a total disadvantage like other titles would. You're not being relegated back to level 0 of upgrades and being shit on, right? So if you want a solid horizontal shooter, give Thunder Force 3 a shake. This game is an oddity because it was created by a company that only made 3 games, Sigma Protech, with the assistance of Cyclone System, which, if you don't know, is an offshoot of ICOM, that only made 5 games. It doesn't look the prettiest, and in comparison to other Genesis games, it is rather old. The Genesis was released in 1989 in America. This game was released in 1990, so we have a glimpse at the early ambitions of developers on the Sega Genesis. Shadow Blasters itself is a side-scrolling platformer, but we can play 4 different warriors that each have distinct attacks and abilities on their journey to take on Ashura, who decided to offload his demon horde on Earth. Now in Japan, this is a difficult game, and that's different from the usual formula when it comes to porting games. Traditionally, Japan gets a game and says, "Fuck are you, America?" and gives us the hard versions. Not in this case. It's actually the opposite. Japan got the hard mode, we got the easier mode. It's much more approachable, more playable, and if you want to check out a more obscure game on the system, I encourage you to check it out. Rocket Knight Adventures is a masterpiece by Konami on the Genesis, and I believe it's because we have a very lovable protagonist that can stand his ground, not only in the video game world, but also in the professional marketing world. Sparkster, the person that we play as, or the animal that we play as, was used fairly heavily by Konami as a pseudo-mascot for a brief moment in time, and that's because the game was massively successful and fun. As Sparkster, we can jump and attack by whacking enemies or guiding an energy projectile. We can charge up our attack and launch ourselves like a rocket, hence the name Rocket Knight Adventures, which also doubles as a way to get to inaccessible areas. We have health pickups, generous lives, and 4 different difficulty settings if we want a more casual experience or a more difficult experience. Now, there was a modern Rocket Knight game. It was simply called Rocket Knight, but it was relegated to the Xbox Live Arcade. It was meant to be a revival of the franchise, but as is expected, it didn't turn out too well. I love this game. I didn't think I would because it's fucking Mickey Mouse and I'm 31, but I love this game. It's a charming, witty, lofty platformer featuring the most famous mouse in the world. What else could you ask for? In the game, we play as Mickey. We go into Mizrabel's castle because Minnie was kidnapped, and we get her back by fighting trivial bosses in unique rooms. And honestly, this game turned out to be a lot better than I thought it was going to. You're always going to be on your toes because you never know what kind of enemy will be thrown at you next, but the game is very fun, even for my kids. The levels themselves are designed fairly well, the game isn't incredibly long, and it was remade in 2013 from the ground up, and it looks wonderful, and it plays just as well as the original. Feel free to check it out. Golden Axe is a rite of passage game on the Sega Genesis. It's a simple hack and slash that was prominent in the arcades as well as the home console spectrum. Golden Axe itself does have an odd history of releases because the plot has a massive divergence that happens between the arcade releases and the home consoles. But Golden Axe itself, the first game, is just a port, so if you want the true Golden Axe experience, feel free to check it out. Just understand that they're gonna get weird after. Plot-wise, we're fighting bad guys in the land of Uria, where a douchebag by the name of Death Adder captured the king and the princess, and 3 warriors of legend are sent off on a high fantasy journey to rescue them, literally killing anything and everything that they can along the way. It's the American dream. Or should I say Urian dream. Now, as a single-player experience, this can be a tough game, especially near the end, but the good news is, it is multiplayer, and from my personal experience, if you introduce another player to the mix, the game becomes not only more fun, but tolerable. The most recent game in this franchise was a nonsensical, stupid game called Golden Axe Beast Rider in 2008, and it effectively killed the franchise. We checked out Mickey Mouse, now it's time to check out Donald Duck on his silly adventure in Quackshot. Another platformer, Quackshot, has us playing as Donald, who finds a piece of a map in Scrooge McDuck's library. To him, this is the path to riches, so he sets out to become a treasure hunter, outfitted with a versatile gun. That's all I'll say. Plungers, gum, popcorn, any projectile you can find. All of these aspects, by the way, are collectible, but the normal shot we get is the plunger, and it's unlimited. We travel to a few stages, Duckburg, India, as well as Egypt, and we find more and more clues concerning the whereabouts of this lost treasure, which turns out to be a golden necklace. And yeah, it's good. I enjoyed it as a kid. Now, Donald does float a little bit. Like, the controls are kind of sketchy, but it is stupid easy. It was easy enough for me to beat as a kid, but much like Castle of Illusion, this game is a novelty fun game that I think you'd have a good time with. I love Streets of Rage as a franchise for numerous reasons. Number 1, to me it's the pinnacle of Yuzo Koshiro's compositional energy, right? I feel that Koshiro is the Tim Follin of the Genesis era. Number 2, it's an incredibly fun game that is made even more fun by hanging out with your friends. Number 3, to me it's the best example of a beat-em-up, period, in that era of gaming. Now, all things considered, this game is challenging, so think of it from the perspective of having a player 2. The game is night and day if you have a well-coordinated player 2. End of discussion. Tackling this single player with stock settings can be daunting. Hell, even putting the max continues and lives can be daunting, but multiplayer? Cake. Streets of Rage 2 continues the story from Streets of Rage 1, where the Syndicate, consisting of Axel Stone, Blaze Fielding, and Adam Hunter, kicked the dog shit out of Mr. X. Mr. X is back, and he's got this new person called Shiva. We have to do it all over again. To me, Streets of Rage 2 is the best in the franchise, which was quiet for a long time, at least until 2021, when they dropped Streets of Rage 4 on us. I don't think anybody expected that. I know that I didn't. Many of the easy games for me involve cooperative play because, like I've said once, and I'll probably say it 100 more times, some games are just fun and easy with a friend. Hyperstone Heist, however, is easy to me both by myself and with a co-op partner. In fact, the game is borderline laughable if you have a player too. It's incredibly short as well. It can be beat in less than an hour, which is another trend for many beat-em-ups of the time. Think of this game as the Genesis version of Turtles in Time because in some ways it's heavily based on it. It's very similar. It's not the same, but it's similar. You know what I'm saying? Different name on the same homework, right? To me, it just boils down to what platform you owned at the time, you know? If you had a Super Nintendo, you had Turtles in Time. If you had a Genesis, you had the Hyperstone Heist. Plot-wise, we see April O'Neil reporting the news like always, and then Shredder pulls a Max Headroom intrusion incident and shrinks Manhattan, as is the power of the Hyperstone from Dimension X. Time for some turtles to go kick them in the ding-ding. You know, normal Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff. TMNT has a long lineage of fantastic games going all the way back to the NES era, and honestly, if there ever was a time to be alive, to me, it was the 16-bit era of Turtles games. I loved them to death. Sonic the Hedgehog is very much a hit or miss for me. Sonic 1 was advertised with the idea of gotta go fast, but also gotta get punished for going fast. And I didn't like it. Sonic 3 is too long for its own good, especially if we combine it with Sonic and Knuckles, which is how it was meant to be played, but Sonic 2 to me is a fair middle range for the amount of nonsense that we're willing to endure. It's balanced, more refined and polished, and pretty decent. The levels are slightly longer, but at the end of the day, I didn't mind it. Speaking of levels, we have 11 zones which consist of 20 levels, or acts, in total, and this time we have Tails tagging along. Now I know that I complained about Tails in another video that I did, but in reality, he's kind of a welcoming addition because if you have him tagging along, then you can use him for an extra hit. There is a multiplayer aspect to this as well, but I can't remember if it's that weird split-screen racing bullshit or if player 2 can just hop in as Tails and play in a co-op setting. I want to say that it's co-op, but don't quote me. I beat this by myself. You would know, and if you do, I encourage you to tell me down below. Sonic obviously still thrives to this day, and the most recent proper Sonic game was Sonic Frontiers, and I'll be honest with you, kind of impressed. Sega historically has been doing some nose beers with Sonic teams, so I was impressed. To some, this game might be too kiddified to check out, but unfortunately there's a lot of hard-ass games on the Genesis. This is an example of what isn't. It's not Disney, instead it's Tiny Toons, which is an offshoot of Looney Tunes. If you don't know what Tiny Toons is, then think of Looney Tunes with just alternate personalities and traits which were retconned to fit into the universe. Instead of Bugs Bunny, we have Buster Bunny. Instead of Lola Bunny, we have Babs Bunny. Same with Plucky Duck and Daffy Duck, Hampton Pig and Porky Pig, you get it. Well, they made a game on the Genesis, and it's shockingly fun for what it is. Now, it's not some groundbreaking, universally acclaimed title, but as a platformer, I found it tremendously fun, and it doesn't really hold your hand. I mean, there is some difficulty to it, but it's approachable. That's the word. That's the special word of the day, right? Approachable. Basically, we go through each level finding Go-Go Dodo to the end, and then it's over, at least from what I remember. There's been quite a few Tiny Toon games, with the most recent being Buster's Bad Dream on the Game Boy Advance in 2002.
Rise from your grave.
Stupid. I'm not a big fan of Altered Beast. At all. I hate this port with every single fiber of my organic being, and I would rather soak my nuts in battery acid than ever play this again. But I would be wrong if I didn't say it was easy, because it is. The levels are incredibly short, you don't really need much skill to beat it. I beat it in like 30 minutes, and if you know what to expect, you're good to go. The principle is that we play as these hunk Adonises that punch and kick two-headed white wolves that give us these orbs, chocked to the brim with a potent mixture of latent homosexuality and steroids that makes us power up! And obviously, we become stronger. And as we get more orbs, we eventually transform into a beast form, which can be a were-dragon, a tiger, wolf, or golden werewolf. And if you play the Famicom version, you can even become a shark. Yeah, imagine that. Altered Beast was a big deal arcade game from Sega, and it was ported to damn near everything, and like I said, I don't particularly like the Genesis version, but it is an easy play, and I do suggest you check it out, at least for novelty's sake. It's funny too, because this game was massively successful, and they abandoned it. Sega. And those are my top 10 easiest Genesis games in my opinion. What did you think of this list? Are there any more games that you might add? Feel free to let me know down below. Who knows, maybe you'll introduce someone to an amazing game that they can add to their library. If you did watch this video all the way, then you're home. Feel free to hit that subscribe button because we would love to have you here. You'll fit in just fine. Also, don't forget to hit that like button as it does help boost visibility for the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortify out.